Welcome, everybody. If you want to put where you're calling in from in the chat, we're excited to see everyone in a virtual space. Yes, feel free to cheer, follow Ashley's lead here in making some virtual noise. I'm sorry, I can't hear all of your We're really excited to have so many of you joining us tonight. It's been a week.
What a year this week has been.
A few months.
Yeah.
It's been a long time, just in general. But I know I'm happy. I'm happy to be in this space. I'm happy to be with these people tonight. That includes all of you. And we're really thankful that you've chosen to spend your evening at our event here tonight. So my name is Cecilia Cackley. I'm the children's and young adult buyer for East City Bookshop. If you're calling in from out of town, haven't been to our shop, we're an independent bookstore located just a few blocks from Congress on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. And we're really thrilled to welcome two fabulous YA authors to our shop tonight. The way this is going to work is I'm going to go over a few logistics, do some intros, and then turn it over to our authors. You'll see at the bottom of your screen that you've got both a chat and a Q&A box. The chat is where we're going to put all of our excitement and love and cheering. It is also, hey Allison, it is also where if you're having any sort of tech issue, you suddenly can't hear, your screen has gone black, I don't know, something. Go ahead and drop that in there, and one of our staffers will be monitoring it and will help you out as best we can. If you have a question for one or both of our wonderful authors, please put those requests into the Q&A box. I will be monitoring that, and at the end of our night, we will have time to take audience questions from there. So if you've got questions, drop them in the Q&A. I will periodically remind you in the chat. And we're gonna hear a wonderful conversation. We're gonna get some answers to our questions and generally celebrate the wonderful book, Darius the Great Deserves Better. So just a couple other notes. If you haven't purchased a copy of the book, we will drop the link to do that on the East City Bookshop website over in the chat. We do still have some signed character cards to go with our wonderful books. So please make those purchases. If you already own it, purchase it for a friend, maybe a neighbor, maybe a school. Maybe all of them. We encourage indiscriminate book buying. So yes, don't be shy. If you would like to know more about virtual events for East City Bookshop, we will put our website in the chat as well. You can sign up for our newsletter there. We send an email a week with what's going on at the shop, including virtual events. This fall, we're really excited about our new series, Lit Out Loud, which brings together authors and their audiobook narrators together for fabulous conversations. I've got two serious heavyweight YA authors coming in this fall. Y'all are gonna be really excited, so keep an eye out for that. If you're in the market for another book club, because honestly, you know, there are just so many options now that we are all on Zoom. And even if you're not in DC, you can join us. Our YA book club is called Wine and Angst. It is for people who are over 21 but still like to read YA. And we meet monthly to read a wide variety of YA books. I know we've got some of our members here in the audience today, and we did read the Darius the Great is Not Okay when it first came out, which was one of our favorites. If you are under the legal drinking age, we also have our Teen ARC Club, where local teens get to read books ahead of publication and make recommendations for what they think we should carry in our shop. And I believe we might actually have one or two of those teens here as well. So those are just some things to consider. All right, I think without further ado, we're gonna move ahead to introductions. So I am super pleased to once again have the honor of introducing Laurie Halse Anderson. Laurie Halse Anderson is a New York Times bestselling author whose writing spans young readers, teens, and adults. Combined, her books have sold more than 8 million copies. Her latest book is Shout, a memoir in verse about surviving sexual assault at the age of 13 and a manifesto for the Me Too era. It has received widespread critical acclaim and is her 8th New York Times bestselling book. Several of her books have been National Book Award finalists and also shortlisted for the Carnegie Medal in the UK. Laurie has been nominated 3 times for the Astrid Lindgren Memorial Award, and she is a recipient of the Margaret A. Edwards Award. She is known in the wonderful world of readers for battling censorship, has been honored by the National Coalition Against Censorship and the National Council of Teachers of English. As well, she regularly speaks about diversity in publishing, and she lives in Philadelphia. You can follow her on social media, and we're so pleased to have you here tonight, Laurie. Thank you so much for being here.
It is a joy, an absolute joy.
And our wonderful author tonight is Adib Khorram, who lives in Kansas City, Missouri. His debut novel, Darius the Great Is Not Okay, received the William C. Morris Award and the APALA Young Adult Literature Award. It was also named a Best Book of 2018 by Time, BuzzFeed, The Wall Street Journal, The Boston Globe, East City Bookshop, so many different places. And when he isn't writing or at his day job, which is as a graphic designer, you can probably find him trying to get his 100-yard freestyle under a minute. I'm impressed. Learning to do a Let's Jump, even more impressed. Or steeping a cup of oolong. That I can probably do, but he can definitely do it better. So Darius the Great Deserves Better is his second novel. And I just have to tell you all, this is, I think, probably the book that I cheered the loudest when I found out that it was happening. And as well as I know many other people did, that we are going to get more stories about Darius. And after reading it, sequels are a funny thing. And I know that a lot of readers know this. And authors know this. I don't really know who's more terrified about sequels, the author or the reader. I think it's probably 50-50. But I think this book makes the case that we need more of them. And I don't normally say that because it's just such a joy to get to spend more time with a character that you've grown to love. And to get to realize that a character who taught you many lessons that are relevant to your life at whatever age has even more lessons to teach you. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Adib and Laurie.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So here we are, my friend. And
I never would have envisioned having to do this virtually.
So what year did we meet? Was that 2016 or 2017?
That was March of 2018 at a Madcap Retreats.
That was just before your book came out.
Mm-hmm.
Ah.
I think I had literally, like, before I drove down, I had just seen the cover for it, and I was a puddle of emotions on the floor.
You were very excited. It was really, it's so much fun to kind of see you at the beginning, and then as you're kind of carving out your own space in our community. And congratulations, you nailed it again. I'm trying so hard not to curse. It's 2020, y'all, and ooh, it comes easily to the mouth.
Right. But we talk like a pirate here.
Yeah. Oh, that would be lovely. But I love this book. And and Cecilia was totally right. You've pulled off a sequel, which I don't know if, that's pretty darn impossible. What I loved about this is that, first of all, you know how much I love the character of Darius. And if you haven't read Darius the Great Is Not Okay, you need to do that tonight. Or at least by the weekend, because it's just such a beautiful, beautiful book. But I was stunned by how well you kept him growing. So this is a year after the events of the first book, correct?
It's next school year, but like
next school
6
year.
Months of like real time, which
time is weird, especially if you're a teenager, right? Mm-hmm. And your body's growing and your mind's growing and your parents are crazy and the world is insane and you're just like, I have all the feels, and he has them.
He has a ton of them.
He has a ton of them, both emotional and physical. You just did an astounding job, I think, showing us the heart and soul of a teenage boy.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a really fraught time of life in general, and
yeah.
Sometimes sometimes I feel like I'm still recovering from it, and so I was definitely able to tap into my own unresolved feeling about it.
This is actually a totally tangent, but this is why I think adults like to read YA, because most of the bad things in life that happen to us that tend to linger and leave scars for a lifetime happen generally before we're 25. And I think YA literature allows adults to go back and process things that they couldn't process when they were younger. But also they're the best written books on the market today. So can you talk to us a little bit, for anybody in the audience who hasn't read the first book, can you give the elevator pitch for that one? And then talk about the choices you made for this one.
For sure. So Darius the Great is Not Okay is about 15-year-old Iranian-American Darius Kellner, who is lonely, depressed, overweight, and obsessed with tea and Star Trek. And he doesn't really have any friends at home in Portland, Oregon. But when his grandfather in Iran gets ill, he and the family go, and it's his first time visiting. And while he's there, he gets to connect with his culture and connect with his family and form his first really true friendship with Sohrab, who's a boy his age, that's his grandparents' neighbor. And it's also full of lots of Iranian food, because apparently I'm always hungry when I'm writing. And so Darius the Great Deserves Better picks up 6 months after. Darius is now 16 years old and in his junior year of high school, which I feel like, I don't know, for me, that was like the year that was like full of transformation for me. And so I was very excited to get to examine Darius's life again. And it picks up on him. He is a little more self-confident now. He has found a friend group in the soccer team that he's joined at his school. He has come out as gay and is dating his boss's son at the tea store where he interns. And his relationship with his father has drastically improved. And his depression is being pretty well managed. And it finds him in kind of a like fairly stable and good place where he's achieved a lot of the things that he set out to achieve, and yet he finds himself pretty unsettled in life and trying to reconcile whether or not he's actually happy with all the choices he's made. Yeah,
that's a great summary. I think that one of the things that our teenagers, movies lie to us all the time. Books tend to be more honest, right? Because movies need hooks and they need to make a lot of money, and we just tell stories in books. And in adolescence, you know, I love the way you phrase it. He kind of has everything he was working towards, and then he's there and he's like, but this isn't what I want. Because there's so much growth and development. How did you, like, obviously, you know exactly what happened in those 6 months between the two books. And I thought you did a great job just every once in a while pulling a thread from those 6 months and weaving it into the story. What was that like for you as a writer, though, making those decisions?
It was a really interesting and kind of organic process for me. It's weird. Every book I had written before this one, I wrote completely, basically by the seat of my pants, free form, with nothing to guide me except for kind of characters and choice and consequence. And with this one, I actually was working from a very loose outline. It was like less than a page of notes, which is a tremendous amount of structure for me to work on. And so it was very weird. The book came, I should preface it by saying that when I finished the first book, I had an idea of what Darius's life looked like very vaguely afterward, because it helped me like figure out where to land him.
Right.
Because I feel like, especially when we're writing for young people, I really feel like it's important to give a sense that life is going to continue past the last page. Because like high school is not the end of the world as much as it feels like it. And so I always want to I want to give the hint that there's more to life. And so I had all these ideas of like what his life was going to be like. And then this time, as I was writing from an outline, it's weird because since I knew kind of what I wanted to achieve, I was able to look back and say, well, what tools do I need to achieve this? Instead of my usual method, which is, well, this is what happened. How can I possibly justify it?
Yeah.
Which is usually me sending a panicked email to my agent or my editor being like, how I did this thing. What did I do? Please tell me what I've done.
They love those emails.
Right. I feel like many of the best conversations come from those emails. But I don't know, it was really weird in this case to have that structure. And it was a very quick writing process and a surprisingly clean first draft for me, because usually my first drafts are garbage fires. At best.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it was really cool.
See, you're growing. We're all growing.
I always like to say every book is a different process, and I say this having only published 2 now, but having written a whole bunch of trunked ones.
Yeah, it's true.
They all needed different things, and this one in particular was very joyful, and I wish I could like bottle the feeling.
Yeah. That joy comes across on the page. I mean, obviously he's facing a lot of challenges, but he does. I love that there's just, I have to say, you might have written my favorite honest discussions about sex in a YA book.
Thank you. I think you probably haven't read your own books then, but
but you're writing about happy sex. I tend to write about,
many of yours have featured very,
they have like a little bit, but you see, he's in this relationship with Landon, who sounds like a very nice, attractive person, and Landon is a little bit more experienced sexually. And Darius is, obviously very comfortable in who he is, his identity is as a gay man, and his attraction to Landon, and everything's copacetic with his parents and stuff, but it's new to him. So I just thought you were so respectful and tender and honest about his feelings with this other man, young man, and then the conversation with his dad. Oh my gosh, Adib. You guys, you have to read the book just for this conversation, because it is, I think, the most loving, equal parts loving and awkward, which it always is, with his father, just trying to make sure that his son understands that it's okay to put the brakes on, it's okay to take time. Can you talk about your decisions and how you got it? God, you did a good job.
I will say, I don't mean to embarrass you, but so much of the through line regarding sex and consent is informed by my knowing you and my admiration for you and the work that you do and continue to do and fight for young people to have good information.
Thanks.
I think I have the article you wrote for Time bookmarked, and I frequently go back and reread it because I just feel like it's so important. And so I always feel like as writers, our job is to balance showing the world as it is and showing the world as it could be. And I felt like particularly with Darius and his dad and talking about sex, I wanted to show what it could be like if parents knew how to talk to their kids, or even if they don't know, but they try anyway. And sometimes they mess up and sometimes it's painful and awkward, but they say to themselves, this is important work for me as a parent to do to prepare my child to be a successful adult, to have safe and healthy boundaries and relationships. And so that really came from there. And I think that was part of it. And then the other big part of it came from kind of my own experience dating, where sometimes me and my partners just were not on the same page about what we wanted. Right. And I hate binary thinking, but I also feel like in large part my experience with other people has fallen into people who need emotional intimacy to be physically vulnerable, and people who need physical intimacy to be emotionally vulnerable. And I really feel like Darius and Landon kind of are on opposite ends of that. And I wanted to explore how we navigate that. And especially when you're a teenager and you've never had to navigate it before. You don't have the vocabulary, you don't have the experience to draw on. You're just kind of flailing in the dark. Oh, you're really good at relationships. you. I wish I was as good in real life.
Well,
Maybe I could have a husband with health insurance.
This is good practice, but he has these layered, nuanced relationships, both with Landon and then this guy he's crushing on, who's also adorable. But it's like the honesty about the fact that he's friends with a guy who's just kind of a jerk. Obviously that kid's in all sorts of pain, and I won't be surprised if you explore that later in a different book. But then the relationship with his little sister, and the abuse that she's suffering at school because her family comes from the Middle East. We know a lot of educators in our community, and we've heard a lot of stories. Do you want to talk a little bit about your decision to highlight that as well?
For sure. When I was very young, I think might have been in first grade. No, I was in preschool the first time I started getting teased for being different. Kids would say my name wrong or call me a dweeb, as that was apparently the most creative insult they were capable of, which, to be fair, when you're 4, your insult repertoire is not great. You haven't studied Shakespeare to be able to call people whoresuns or insolent curs. But I was very kind of, those wounds are probably always going to be with me.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, in the first book, Darius has been experiencing those wounds, but his sister has not yet. Mm-hmm. And Darius is in some ways a little bit jealous of her sister being, kind of popular. But things are constantly shifting, and every year of grade school is different. The landscape constantly shifts, and my experience has been that people don't always like to be reminded that you are different from them. And Lale going to Iran and coming back reminded her classmates that she was different. And so now she's in 3rd grade and is getting bullied. And I have a lot of respect and admiration for teachers, but I also know that it is an overwhelmingly white profession, and as educated and as activist as teachers are, they do not always realize their own ignorant spots.
Yeah. And
Darius's sister is suffering, and her teacher doesn't understand or have the tools to deal with that.
Right.
And then basically decides, oh, Lale is struggling in school, not because people are being mean to her, but because she's smart and is not being challenged. And so let's put her in the gifted program, which I feel like maybe I had like an inkling of the white supremacist legacy of the gifted program, but I was listening to a podcast called Nice White Parents from the New York Times recently that really kind of laid bare the whole structure of it as a tool of white supremacy. And I was like, oh, no wonder I was so messed up as a child.
Oh.
And I guess I also wanted to show Darius growing into his own advocacy and desire for activism and justice, and kind of the frustrations when you're young and don't always have the tools and don't have the ability to make people listen to you. Right. And I feel like that's our fault as a society, that we do not value the voices of teenagers the way that we should, because I feel like they're way smarter than we give them credit for, way more informed, and way more compassionate and kind, because they haven't yet had meanness instilled in them.
Yeah, and they can still feel that things should be fair. Mm-hmm. There's one quote that leapt off the page for me that I had to sit back and go, oh, I need to think about this. And the quote is, "It's okay to keep something you love just for you," as opposed to becoming the best soccer player or playing the cello so much you get to be first chair in the orchestra, and all these really kind of competitive, dominance-based attitudes we shove at our kids all the time, instead of just, letting them love doing what they're doing. Please talk about that, because it took my breath away.
First of all, sidebar, I did play cello in middle school, and I practiced harder than I ever had in my life to get first chair for one particular concert, because we were playing like my favorite piece of music, and I managed to get it, and then immediately was bumped back down to like 4th chair after that. I was like, that's okay, I had my moment. But I think, you know, I feel like all of the books we write are always time capsules of where we are emotionally as a writer. And so I was coming from making the change from writing for me to writing as a job, which has had its own, processing for me. I was thinking about like other things in life that I have loved and done and that have changed in some way when either they become work or when other people enter into them, and how that changes. I was thinking about the advice I actually got from Molly, my agent, the same day that we sold the first Darius. She's like, okay, you need a new hobby now. Yeah. Because writing is like officially a job with responsibilities and deadlines and stress attached to it. So you need to go find something just for you. And I've kept that really close to my heart, and I tell it to literally every other writer I talk to now. And for me, it was figure skating because I was obsessed with Yuri on Ice. But I just think it's so important to find joy in things, and guard them sometimes, because we need those things that are only for us, or not necessarily only for us, but that are primarily for us, and that maybe we let people in sometimes, but we don't. We keep the focus on ourselves a little bit. I think there's sometimes a weird pressure, especially on young people, that everything in their life they have to share. And I feel like it's gotten worse with social media, and I feel like it's really crucial to say it's okay to have corners of your heart that are private.
That is, I think, the most loving, respectful statement I've ever heard about and for young people.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I that's why I had to write this down. This is going to be a journal entry because, I'm always thinking about how do we do this better? Clearly, we are not loving all of our children the way we should. And we're just look out the window to see how miserably we failed them. And, but our community, and the adults who value our community, we have the opportunity to, let's figure out this new world. Let's figure out, and there's a lot of that kind of really integrity-based love in this book. I can't wait for everybody to read it.
Thank you.
I know they're going to jump on and make us answer questions soon.
Oh my gosh, time is going so quickly.
Isn't it? There's
and I just touched my face too.
Oh, you try not to do that?
No, I've completely given up. I'm a gay man. I can't help it.
Another quote that made me puddle up and stop is, "Some days you just have to cry." Can you talk about, because you're so open about depression in this book, and I love that the Darius's dad is struggling so, God bless him, so hard against depression, and that's another part of their relationship that just strengthens both of these men. Please teach me.
Sure. I don't know that I have any. I don't know. I feel like teaching is always hard because I always feel like everyone has their own emotional needs, but I feel like so much of the world, so many of the problems of the world, especially in the United States, would be a lot better if we didn't always tell little boys not to cry. And I think of the ways I was messed up when I was young and being told not to cry. I think of research that's being done about the biological benefits of crying when you need to. And I think about the kind of tremendous relief that I feel after I do have a good cry. And I wish we as a society told not just boys, but everyone, it's totally okay. You should do it. There's a reason. There's a reason we are biologically capable of feeling so hard that we have to cry.
Right.
Whether it's joy or sadness. And why would we inhibit it? Like you wouldn't, like if you hold, not to be gross, but if you hold pee too long, you die, apparently. Things start exploding. So why should you hold your emotions so long?
Right.
You die.
Yeah.
The death is slower, but
Yeah.
And I think maybe sometimes it's more of a death of spirit.
Absolutely.
Boy, that was just a really messy metaphor, and I apologize to
No,
everyone in the
but
audience
but
for the
I
image
think
of an exploding bladder. But
you do descriptions of the body and the parts of the body that are not often described. You do those with a certain flair, my friend.
I just feel like this is something I feel like I really learned from you, is that if we demystify young people's bodies to them, they get to take ownership of them.
Yes.
And when they know that they own their body, I feel like A, they know to demand respect for it, but B, it becomes easier to imagine other people owning their bodies and respecting them.
And in a book like yours, you see kids, especially kids who don't have adults in their lives who are comfortable saying words like penis and vagina, which is like elbow and earlobe as far as I'm concerned. But you have to see it to be it. You have to say, oh, well, look in this book. They're just the kids. He has a penis and he has testicles, and he refers to them, but not in this like over the top 80s teen movie kind of way. It's just like it's part of his body that he's very fond of. And it can be embarrassing sometimes, and it can be a joy sometimes, and it's just handled in such a matter-of-fact way that I know this is going to be a good read for a lot of people. Just the fact that his life is told. Adib, I've always loved the way that you speak, because you have a presence about you that is I find very calming. You and I we had tea together last year in Los Angeles, and it was in the middle of this giant crazy hotel, and you were so generous and kind, and you had brought some tea, and you just made this island of calm for me in that space. And it was lovely to catch up with you then. But I feel the same way about Darius. I see that piece of you, and maybe I'm projecting, but I see that piece of you in him. And the way that he's beginning to learn how to operate as a man in his world. Can I ask what's next for him?
What's next for Darius?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Darn it.
I have some ideas of what I think his senior year is like.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess fingers crossed that I'll get to write a third one. I know there's
absolutely
there's like a lot of publishing people in here right now.
Yeah, I'm looking at them.
And I was like, I think it'd be really fun. I also knew going in, like when I wrote the first book, it was a standalone.
Yeah.
And when I wrote this one, I wanted it to stand on its own. And
if
even if people hadn't read the first one, I wanted them to see a complete story about a young man's life. And even if it does not continue in written form, I hope people can imagine a good life for him.
Yeah. I'm on it. I'm thinking about it. I won't stop thinking about it. And Cecilia has joined us again.
Yes, hello.
It's a good thing you said that, Laurie, about, we're going to have questions soon, because I completely had just been like, oh, I'm just listening. And then I was like, you have a job, Cecilia? You're not? Okay. Anyway, questions. We have lots of fabulous questions. From Janine. One of my very favorite things about Darius the Great is Not Okay is the absence of a romantic storyline and the complete focus on friendship. Why do you think that's so rare in YA, and how did you decide to focus that particular story on friendship and personal growth?
Ooh. I'm going to answer the second part first, which is that when I was a teenager, I was very closeted. I was not dating anyone. I wasn't trying to date girls either. But all of the most relationships in my life were my friends. And even amongst the friends I had that did date, we tended to hang out, like they hung out with their friends as much as with whoever they were dating. And I felt like I just wanted to write about that. And I certainly did not have any interest in writing a forbidden gay romance set in Iran.
No.
There's space for those, and those are needed, but I was not the right person to tell them. I mean, one of my favorite books is Sarah Farazan's If You Could Be Mine, which is beautiful and heartbreaking and desperately needed. But where I was in my life when I was writing Darius, I wanted something different. And I think the reason we devalue friendships in YA has to do a lot with, unfortunately, market forces. And I think, when I look back on the YA that was coming out pre-Twilight, stuff by like Chris Crutcher and Walter Dean Myers, and even you, Laurie, so much of it was more focused on friendship, and I kind of want to say a more realistic depiction of what being a teenager was like. And I have no disrespect for Twilight at all. I devoured all 4 books in like a week. But I do think it's a kind of a sensationalized or heightened version of what it is like to be a teenager and what romance is like. And I think as Twilight brought in more readers, many of those readers stopped being teenagers. And in some ways, I think that's where we kind of see the divide in publishing between like school and library books and commercial books. Is, boy, I hope I don't get roasted for this, but I also don't necessarily care, because I really feel like it's true that some books we are centering real teen experiences, and some books we are not. Right. And I don't think there's like inherent value in one over the other, but I do think they do different things. And I think many of the big books we've seen in the last decade are ones that are maybe a little bit more focused on a broader crossover audience than purely on, what a 14-year-old in Wisconsin is experiencing.
Yeah, I would from the perspective of a bookseller, I would 100% agree with all of that.
We'll all be canceled together.
From Melissa for Laurie, having been in the industry for such a long time, how have you seen the publishing industry change?
It's more interesting to think about how hasn't it changed. It's the acceptance of graphic novels has been a tremendous joy for me and everybody. I mean, just the expansion of art into books and that crossover between the visual art and the written word, I just think is, for me, the greatest thing of the century so far. We're beginning to make a little bitty tiny bit of progress in terms of equity and inclusivity. If anybody hasn't seen it yet, please go look at the manifesto published by the Brown Bookshelf yesterday. Maybe somebody can throw that up into the chat, a link to that. And it was a manifesto about, we have a couple of Black authors and brown authors on the New York Times bestseller list. And that's awesome. And they're amazing books and amazing people, but we have so much farther to go. And we have farther to go in terms of institutional changes. Small, you can hear the door creaking open. There's a lot of people who have good intentions. But I think especially for white people, speaking as a white person, there's a lot of work for us to do internally and within our communities to make sure that our actions are aligning with what we think is in our hearts. So what else? As I told you, there's nothing, everything has changed. You can curse a lot more in YA than you used to be able to. The fact that Darius in his book has some not graphic, but tender and honest explanations of romantic encounters that are emotional and physical at a certain level. And that the character is thinking about that and talking about that in a really responsible, everything's awkward when you're a teenager, at least it was for me. So that's tremendously good too. So I see a lot of good things happening.
And for Adib, what made you return to Darius's story?
Ooh, I will answer that, but I do want to dovetail with Laurie and really quickly say, if you haven't yet, I do really encourage everyone to listen to the podcast Nice White Parents, because I feel like so much that they discuss about creating equity in schools is easily transferable to publishing, so far as learning to listen, learning to sacrifice privilege and power to make sure that it's a better system for everyone. So I definitely strongly encourage that. As far as returning to Darius, it was, in some ways, it was kind of an accident, but it's really fortuitous that we're actually here at East City because in some ways this book was born at East City Books when Dana, my editor, and I were there doing an event around the first Darius, and someone in the audience asked if there was ever going to be a sequel. And Dana in the very back row of the audience gave me 2 thumbs up. And I had never before considered that it might be a possibility,
Wow.
but that kind of planted a seed. And after, they always say, when your first book is getting ready to come out, you should always be writing your second book. And so I was, like a diligent author, writing my second book. And I was really excited about it. I loved the characters. I loved the concept, but I really struggled to write it. And I sent it off to my agent, Molly, and she read it and she called me back and she said, "How honest do you want me to be?" And I was like, "Molly, I'm a theater kid. You should always be 100% honest with me." And we had this like really long, good conversation about how we both really like the characters and the world. And boy, it'd be nice if there was a plot. And I was hoping that Molly would find the plot because I certainly couldn't. But neither of us really could. And we talked about it. We're like, maybe this isn't the right follow-up. Maybe I'm not ready to tell this story yet. So, what else do you have cooking? And I was like, well, I did this event with Dana where Dana was like, gave me a thumbs up about writing a sequel. And so we talked about that. And like, I kind of gave Molly the very, very bare bones pitch of what I envisioned for Darius's life. And she's like, it sounds like maybe this is the book you need to write. And so then we talked to Dana and we're like, oh, maybe we should do this. And so basically, I came back to Darius's story because the other story I wrote was a disaster. And it has been trunked, and hopefully someday I'll figure out how to make it work.
So in the spirit of that, a question from one of our loyal Wine and Angst members, who I think is probably our biggest Darius fan in the entire group. So shout out to Erica. Erica says, Adib, in the last book, you talked about how Darius represents the experience of queer kids who don't have a label yet. Haven't read the second book yet, but what was it like to write him now that he's come out and in a romantic relationship?
Ooh, it was really liberating in a way, because as I mentioned, I was not out when I was in high school. I wasn't really out in college either. And it was kind of nice to go back and relitigate my high school years in a way and say to myself, what could it have been like if I felt as safe as Darius, if I was as supported as Darius? So I don't know, maybe it was kind of wish fulfillment or maybe it was just self-therapizing, but that was really fulfilling to do. And it was also really exciting to come back and find him after he had come out. I feel like coming out stories are always important and are always going to be important. But I think there's a contrarian in me that always is pushing against whatever I feel like is the prevailing narrative. And I was like, okay, well, we have all these coming out stories, but what about what happens after? And so that's why I wanted to look at what happens after. And it was, I don't know, it was really fun.
A question from M for both of you. How do you think or hope writing about topics related to mental health, which both of you have done, will change the YA landscape for the better?
Laura, you go first.
Oh, darn.
Goes.
Yeah. It already has. It already has. And if we look back to Judy Blume and Walter Dean Myers and Chris Crutcher and sort of the others who some of people who are still writing, but others who kind of, broke those barriers long before I came along, and then sort of my generation of writers. I see now one of my greatest joys is meeting teachers and librarians and parents who read my books when they were in high school. And not just my books, right? But also, the books of my peers, and it changed them. It changed them in a way that Old Man in the Sea doesn't change you when you're in 9th grade. hated that book so much. If I didn't read it. I've read it now as an adult. It's actually, for a slightly older person, it's rather lovely, but not ninth grade. And I think that more and more districts across the country and families are recognizing that the canon was designed for a bunch of wealthy old white guys in the late 1800s, and they have nothing to do with our kids today. And the problems that our kids are facing today are acute and fatal sometimes. And if they're not fatal in the short run, they are fatal in the long run, in that the kids are not supported and loved and honored and made to feel safe so they can do that deep work and figure out who are they, what problems do they want to solve, what do they have to share with their own communities. And the more stories we can give them where they see examples of that, and maybe examples of people messing up, then we can help them decide how to chart their own path. It is an honor to do that kind of work.
I have to say, I kind of feel exactly the same as Laurie. I am much less concerned about changing the landscape of publishing than I am with changing the landscape of young people's lives. And I feel like every time we talk honestly with young people about our own struggles growing up and about fictional characters' struggles as they grow up, we are preparing them for the world, and we are giving them permission to open up about their own struggles.
Thank you. Question from Robert. You both make me cry when I read your books. Me too. That's not a question. Adib, how do you go about making such fantastic and mouth-watering descriptions of food and tea?
One, I'm kind of always hungry. And so it's just always on my mind. Two, I in fact do have a flavor wheel of tea, which is over by my tea. And so sometimes I'm just like, when I drink tea, I'm like, what does this taste like? And I have to break out the wheel and see if I can pin what it reminds me of. And it says the tea flavor wheel, it is identical to the wine flavor wheel, which is another one of my great loves. But I don't know that I ever know exactly what I'm doing as a writer. I'm always trying to be honest. And so when I'm like describing a dish, it's literally just like, how would I describe the dish to someone that I really wanted to make hungry for it? And all the all the fancy language I can summon, and sometimes in the, no, you don't understand, this is the best thing you will ever eat, please eat it, kind of language. Just like mix the two as you need.
Well, it definitely works. Okay, two questions that are slightly related. One from Julie and one from Sarah. Julie says, I remember being surprised when I read somewhere that you didn't visit Iran when you wrote the first book. Did you get a chance to visit while writing the sequel? And then from Sarah, do you know if anyone in Iran has read your work?
So very early on in the Orange One's presidency, he withdrew the United States from the nuclear deal with Iran, which basically proved to the Iranian government and kind of the Iranian people that America is never going to keep its promises, and we're a bunch of liars, which is what the government-controlled media and messaging had already been, that America is a bunch of liars who can't be trusted. And so we finally proved that to them, and enacted more and harsher, crippling sanctions, even as the rest of the world was finally reaching rapprochement with Iran. So no, I have not been able to visit, and in fact, if anything, the likelihood of my ever getting to visit has gone down since the Orange One's election. Whereas before that election, when the nuclear deal happened, me and pretty much everyone else I know in the diaspora thought it was the first sign of hope of peace that we had seen in our lifetimes, of things one day getting better to where I could visit. Being gay also makes it very complicated to go to Iran, and being from a family of Baha'i refugees adds a layer of complication. But I think we all had a lot of hope that the nuclear deal was going to lead to better relations between Iran and the United States and the West in general, and also to a slow liberalization of Iran. And so that's just, those dreams are all flushed down the toilet. Sorry, what was the second part of the question? I just made myself really sad.
Do you know if anyone there has read your book?
Ooh. I do not know of anyone there that has read it, because media coming into Iran is fairly controlled and censored, especially Western media. But I do know there's a Russian edition, and Russia shares a border with Iran, and so maybe some are trickling in. I can only hope, because I think that'd be really cool.
So Megan says, Darius the Great is Not Okay was so well received and well loved, as you can tell from all of us. Can you talk a little bit about what that's been like and experiencing that reception while writing book 2? And if there are any particularly lovely stories you would like to share about young readers that you've heard from?
Ooh. The reception to the book still kind of amazes and surprises me. I never ever believed anyone would want to publish a book about an Iranian American teenager who's obsessed with tea and Star Trek. I'm amazed that I got to keep any of the Star Trek references, much less all of them. And then amazed when people really connected with it and when it started doing well. And I tried, as much as my imposter syndrome is very powerful, I tried to let those experiences buoy me on the bad days of writing. And much like when my car had a broken clutch and I had to go as fast as I could downhill to hope I would coast uphill. So I let any good attention help me pick up speed on the downhill so I could make it to the top of the hill when things were hard. As far as, I've had lots of really amazing experiences with young readers, and I'm always really careful about sharing them, because I really want to protect that space for them. But I have talked with young kids who had just come out and what their experiences were like. I had talked to some who were thinking about it but weren't quite ready. Some who'd had bad experiences about coming out. I have talked to kids who have mental health issues that they're not getting treated for. Others who found the words to get help from the book. And I've talked to lots of kids of all ethnicities who were living in diaspora and had the feeling of being with their family again from reading my book. And I hold those very close to my heart, and feel very honored to be given that trust from those young people. So it's pretty magical. Also, it's really cool when young people think that you're cool. I crave the approval of young people.
It happens so rarely for most of us adults. We're always the boring ones.
Once I stopped not being able to beat my young cousins at Smash Brothers, all sources of external validation from people younger than me disappeared. And so finally it's coming back a little bit from writing.
A question from Zach Smedley, author of The Fabulous Deposing Nathan, I just have to say. Great to see you both again. Do either of you have any advice about pushing through second book syndrome? Does it get easier by book 3?
Ooh. I can safely say, as someone whose second book got trunked, that the only way out was through. And I really feel like as writers, with all books, but particularly with that second book, we have this this feeling in ourselves that we have to make it perfect. We have to write the perfect next book. And I've come to feel like we don't have to write the perfect anything. We just have to do the best we can and let it go. And thank goodness there are editors.
Yes.
Who make it better. So that in some ways, I feel like that's kind of useless advice. But I also feel like every book is different and every writer is different and every writer-book pairing is different. And we as writers don't always trust our own instincts. And I feel like we do better when we do trust our instincts. And even if that instinct is this isn't working. I feel like one of the most important skills for a writer is to know when to set something aside and come back to it when we've grown a little.
In the last 20 years, I've written 5 books that never saw the light of day. Mostly because I didn't turn them in because they were things that I had to write just because I didn't have like the gut idea. So I wrote books from my head. And I don't regret a moment or a page of those books because I had to write them in order for my subconscious to figure out the next book that was actually going to be worth sharing. So I think it's important to recognize that sometimes we put a lot of stories, we do a lot of creative stuff that doesn't necessarily wind up on a bookshelf or in a library. And that's okay. When I asked, who was it? I think I asked Chris Crutcher when I was working on, I have like a line of historical fiction, and then in a different publisher, Penguin, that's where I have all my YA, most of my YA. And so for me, second book syndrome wasn't until I had to go back and write another YA. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to do this. This is horrifying. And Crutcher, being the jock that he is, pointed out how many millions and millions of dollars professional baseball players get if they hit a ball well once every 3 times. You know, and he said, you are out, you don't have control over most of what's going to happen to your book, but you have total control over what goes in between the covers. And so put your energy where you have control.
That's a great reminder, I think, not just to writers, but for anybody in any job. Yeah. So thank you for that. Thank you, Chris, for that. All right, I think we're going to have to wrap it up here. So we're just about at 8. Thank you all so much for your wonderful questions. Thank you, Adib and Laurie, for your wonderful insight and wisdom and timely reminders to all of us. If you haven't purchased the book, if you haven't purchased Darius, The Great Deserves Better, we just dropped the link in the chat again. You can also purchase Laurie's books there as well. A little ways up in the chat, I put the link if you'd like to sign up for the Wine and Angst Book Club. I'm also going to drop one other link in here, which is a wish list that we're running for New Endeavors by Women, which is a local organization in DC working to help women and other folks transitioning from homelessness and turning their lives around. They have a common room that needs a library. All of the books there are for little kids, and they had a wonderful 7th grader who reached out and said, hi, I need books. And we went, we can probably help you with that. So if you have a few dollars to spare, purchase a book off of that list, and we will make sure that it gets to the library. So that's in there. Sign up for our newsletter to find out more about other events coming up. And again, thank you so much for a fabulous event.
Cecilia, can I ask one thing? Can you take those links that are in the chat that's about to disappear, and maybe throw them on Twitter or something for people to follow up with? That'd be great. Yeah. All right. Well, love. Let me do my heart. It's hard onto it, right? Beat my yes. I love, and it's so delightful to see old friends and new friends in the chat. And thank you, Adib. This has just been my whole month. This was a pleasure. Buddy. Congratulations. You've written another magnificent book.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Have a great night, everyone.
Yes, be gay, do crimes.